Hold on a second.
My name, Royce Hanson. My name, I was born in eastern South Dakota, born and raised on a farm, went to work at early age, Missouri River breaks, from there on just cowboyed my whole life. Several states, South Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Nevada. I'm back here in Montana, and just a way of life that come easy, solitude, God, nature, and animals, raised a family. Probably didn't do too good a job on that. A lot of good people. A very good wife. Probably ruined her with all this business. She stood it well. I like to, I work alone, try to, solitude, animals, raw land, a big country. It's just a way of life. Some people prefer, some don't. And people wonder how you can live by yourself and not get out and not go out, so on, this and that. It's really pretty easy. If you can't live with yourself, you're not. Can't be any easier to live with a lot of people around you.
Okay, well, I'm Justin Case. I was born in Idaho and moved to Oklahoma and just kind of come back up here, just cowboyed around a little, you know. Worked in several feed yards and outfits all over. And, well, you know, just like to aggravate cows, you know. I eat beef to get even, so. But I like this northern country quite a bit. I've been down to Texas and over to Kansas and Nebraska and all that. And this is just kind of where I like to go. I always end up back here in Wyoming, so nice piece of country. I've never really had any other job other than, you know, I grew up on a pretty small outfit. Dad raised some cows and, you know, plenty of colts and shit around for me to do, and I just kind of never did grow up. Just kept going, you know. And I rodeoed a little bit through high school, but you know, that's just needed something paid every day, and this works for me. Just the lifestyle, you know, it's quiet. You know, you don't get too excited, and I don't have to see a lot of people, you know, out away from everything. I just want to aggravate, you know, some cows and, you know, kick a dog every now and then, you know, stay happy. If you're not happy, you're wasting time. Every now and then, you know, a fellow wants to rope something just to hear it beller, you know. And you can't do that in town, you know. I don't know if they have any certain, you know, trade is still okay, whatever, you know, they're all kind of running together.
This last one's
My name's Tom
but-
Morehouse.
This last one's Tom Morehouse, who was in the Revealing Character book and the digital image before, but, you know, Texas cowboy. First guy was at the end of his, you know, kind of cowboying days, kind of very reflective in his early 70s. The second guy was single, young, and, you know, just wild spark. And then Tom's kind of like, you know, late middle career. And I think you hear that to me in the stories that these guys tell. So I'll just,
Royce
oh,
Hanson.
sorry.
My name's
There it is. Hold on.
Royce
No.
Hanson.
my name's Tom Morehouse, and I'm 59 years old, and I was born and raised on a ranch between Benjamin and Guthrie, Texas, that my dad owned, Morehouse Ranch, and actually that's the only place I've ever lived. When I was a kid, I worked for the Sixties and stayed out there wagging. And then I went to college at Saul Ross, but other than that, I lived in the same house or the bunkhouse next to it all my life. And so that's how I started cowboying. I didn't actually start, I was just, in other words, before I remember that's what I was doing because that was the way I was raised. And I had 3 brothers and we all were raised like that. And I don't remember the first time I rode, and I don't remember the first time I smelled burning hair from a branded calf. And I couldn't tell you how to ride a horse because it just seems to me that anybody could ride a horse because that's the way it was for lots of cowboys. They were just born around horses and rode before they were old enough to remember. But I do remember when I was a kid and I worked at the 60s and I'd just gone there and it was a cold fall morning and misting a little, and we came in from making a big round that morning, turned our horses loose and walked up the wagon, and I walked inside that big tent, which they call a fly, and they had a wood stove going, and you could smell that mesquite wood, and the biscuits were cooking, and it was warm in there, and they had lanterns in there, and it's just all the dim light, but I thought I was in heaven.
Okay, Lee. Okay. So anyway, on that trip, I gathered up, I think, about 125 of these audio recordings, and I had to condense those down. But I mean, I could have sat here and played Tom Morehouse's, which is an 8-minute interview with no editing, and it's all very interesting and funny. And I mean, so these guys have a lot to say. I mean, it's pretty to the point, but it's all pretty interesting stuff. But I was lucky to evolve it, the project that way. I guess my interest in this group of people is their lack of fear, I guess, of working hard and living a life that might be considered hard by other people, but doing it because they love doing what they're doing. And I think a lot of people. The kid in Elko, Nevada that I photographed was valedictorian of his class in Salt Lake City and had offers, 4-year full paid offers to go to school and, probably end up making a lot of money. And, he's 20 years old, so maybe he's not thinking straight, but he's thinking honestly, which is he wanted to cowboy and he was following his heart, not following a paycheck. And I think that's pretty rare these days. And I, just celebrate these guys and men and women for doing something that they love. And probably the common thread, whether it's Texas or Nevada or Montana or South Dakota, that any of these people have is love of being outside, love for their families, love of being on a horse, and not being cooped up. I mean, that means a lot to these people, and I think that's great. They're happy, and being around happy people. If I have to be away from my family, there's probably not a group I've met yet. There may be other groups out there, but there's probably not a group I've met yet that I would rather spend my time with if I'm away from my family than these people. So, fantastic. The last few images are pretty far from cowboys. When we were living in Mexico, there are mummy museums all over Mexico. There's, I think, 47. And I went and did a small little project in the Guanajuato Mummy Museum, and it's the first time I've ever used artificial lights, which consisted of 2 fluorescent light bulbs. And working, it took me probably 9 weeks, probably no more difficult project to get access to than this museum. It took me 9 weeks of negotiations with the Mexican bureaucracy to get in, but they let us in for 2 nights from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. with an assistant, and they moved the mummies in and out. And, the exposures on these plates were 7 minutes long, and, so I got to make a lot of images, but nobody moved, of course. And so I ended up with plates that I could experiment with later, and, I used a torch and heated things up and burned plates. And so it was the first time I'd really been afforded the luxury of making an image I cared about and then getting an image that was almost identical, but, a little bit different, that I could then experiment with distressing, because since each plate is a one of a kind, I mean, if you get a plate that you really like, you don't want to start messing around with it unless you have extras. So. And the last couple of images are from, and again, just trying different things every time I had the opportunity. These images were made in the state of Chihuahua, and of Tarahumara Indians. And so I started making images where I didn't put the emulsion on the plate fully. And there's no, I mean, since I shoot with an 8x10 camera and make 5x7 inch images, I don't mark my ground glass. And the serendipity that happens by not knowing exactly where the frame is, you kind of have a good idea where it is, and the uncontrolled nature of making tintypes to begin with, all these things, happy accidents happen, sometimes unhappy, but you just kind of go with the flow and just kind of let things happen as far as composition and where the lack of emulsion exists and whether it works or not. So I started dealing with a little bit of that, trying that, see how it went. And then also I took the potassium cyanide's the last step of the process. So when you take it from the last water bath and put it into the potassium cyanide, it turns from a negative that's kind of blue in color to a positive. And I started thinking, well, what if I took an eyedropper with potassium cyanide and only applied it where I wanted it to be a positive and let the other areas remain this bluish negative? And since the whole emulsion's wet, it's totally uncontrollable. So you can put the potassium cyanide on his face and that's going to turn positive, but it starts to blend into the bandana. And again, it's uncontrolled, but in a way it's kind of nice to be out of control. And so again, just trying to push the process in different ways. And I think that's what's still exciting to me about making tintypes is historically everybody was trying to make a beautiful, perfect tintype. And so there's a lot of room to have interpretation, whether it's distressing or split toning during the way I've done it with this potassium cyanide that people in the 19th century would never have done because it would have been a imperfect picture. So to me there's still a lot of room to experiment and create images that didn't exist historically. And this is the last image, which is a 20 by 24 inch camera that I had made. And I've made a few 20 by 24 inch tintypes. And Bill has asked to see one as proof. And I mean, I'm working through the workflow. I mean, it's 1,400% larger. So actually the silver nitrate bath weighs 88 pounds. The potassium cyanide bath is 88 pounds. So everything scale-wise is just mammoth. And I've made quite a few 20 by 24 inch tintypes, but I haven't made one I want to share yet. I mean, they're all fine. I've got everything, but I just haven't made an image that I'm, ready to share. So that's kind of where I'm going next, or at least experimenting with. And, historically they never made a tintype larger than 14 by 17 inches. So, so this is again something that hasn't been done, but that's kind of where I've, gone with it next. We'll see where it leads to, but that's it. Thank you. I don't know if there are any questions. I'm happy to answer any questions. Bill.
Rob, when you did the mummies,
right,
and they would bring them out and you would do too, would you expose both plates at the same time and develop them at the same time?
No, the question was whether I would shoot multiple plates while the mummy was out at the same time. And, the exposure's already being 6-8 minutes long. Typically the emulsion dries out, especially in dry climates. They say that, within 4 minutes you need to be processing. So 8 minutes was already pushing the limit. So I would make one exposure, then go process it, and then come back. And because I knew, of course, the subject wasn't going to move. So that was.
But one other question, would you just a little bit tell people about your lens? Because I'm fascinated by that you would.